Welcome back, YouTube. Today we're going to continue with the How to Build Muscle series. In the previous videos I've gone through nutrition basics and nutrition in a little bit more detail. Very last video I went through training basics, and in this video we're going to continue with that, look at training basics a bit more and maybe some finer details. Don't forget, if you do enjoy the video, please do drop a like. If you've got any questions during or after the video, throw them down in the comments, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe. Okay, so in the last training basics video we went through progressive overload, okay? So, you know, trying to build almost volume up over time, trying to give that stimulus consistently over time that your body needs to adapt. So, the first thing I want to talk about in this video is volume. Just remember, volume can be weight, sets and reps, okay? But in this sense we're looking at volume also from a set point of view, right? Because obviously as time goes on, you know, within a training phase, you might need to then, you know, build sets up over time to increase that volume, potentially. And one thing we want to think about when we look at volume and look at sets is starting with the minimum effective and building from there. So the minimum effective is simply doing the least we can while still getting the response we want, okay? And again, we can think of this more so probably from sets, and think of it from sets per muscle group. Okay, so all this basically means is that we want to try and find an amount of sets per week that, you know, you're still getting a decent pump, you're still feeling maybe slight DOMs, but you're still recovering well enough that come the next training session, you're feeling 100%, you can go again. Okay, so we're giving our body that stimulus that it needs to adapt, but we're also recovering easily and happily enough that we can be very consistent and optimal with our training. Okay, so for example, that might look like 8 to 10 sets per muscle group per week. Each muscle group might differ. So for example, for me, hamstrings, I just can't do as much volume as say like chest and back. You know, when I try and ramp hamstring volume up as much as that, I tend to suffer from it. Okay, so what starting with the minimum effective allows us to do is, one, allows us to recover well enough so that we can train optimally. But two, it also then gives us a lot of room that we can work within when we need to progress things. So when we start down here, we have a lot of room that we can work up to the point where, let's say, you know, when we get here, when we get to this amount of sets, let's say that might be 12, 14, 16, 18 sets per muscle group. When we get here, that might be our sort of ceiling, where we can't recover as well, where training stalls, where we have to then pull back, right? But if we start at the minimum effective, we have a lot of room. If we don't start at the minimum effective and we start higher up, all of a sudden we have less room to progress things. Okay, so it doesn't only allow us to recover very well, but it also allows us to have room to progress things over time. And as we spoke about last video, progressive overload is important. Secondly, we're going to look at reps. Now, just before I go into this, I have done separate videos solely on sets and reps. Okay. So if you haven't checked them out, go and do check them out. Because when I'm walking through sets like I just did and reps in this video, I'm going through it at a little bit faster paced, just because I've got a few more things to talk about. So do go and check those videos themselves. When we look at reps, to keep this simple, there isn't a set rep range that you need to hit to build muscle mass. Okay. In fact, there's a large amount of rep ranges, or let's say a big rep range in general, could be anywhere between 5 to 30, could even be either side of that. That is going to allow us to give our bodies a good enough stimulus to add muscle mass. Okay, so adding variety within this rep range might actually be the most beneficial thing to do when it comes to adding muscle mass. So you might have some exercises that are 5 to 8, you might have some exercises that are 8 to 12 reps, some that are 12 to 20, some that are 20 to 30, and so on. Okay, but all those different rep ranges are going to allow us to give our body and muscles a stimulus worthy of then adding muscle mass, you know, adapting. So like I said, it probably pays to play around these rep ranges and have a variety across exercises, even across sets within exercises. Thirdly, form and execution. Now, this could have even gone very, very first, okay, because we need to make sure form and execution is good and spot on before we do anything else. Okay, form and execution is, you know, vital for a number of things. One, safety. If form and execution isn't on point, we run the risk of getting injured, if I can speak. Now, building muscle mass, we need patience. It's going to take a long time, and we need consistency. So if we get injured, that means time out, and that is obviously then going to hinder our ability to add muscle mass for wherever that injury is. So 1, it helps us stay away from injury. 2, it makes sure that the movement we're doing is effective. Okay, that stimulus that we're giving is effective. If form and execution isn't great, you know, we might be using stuff like momentum, and we're just basically not going to be training on that muscle group directly as well. Okay, so again, it's just the movement itself. What we're getting out of that session or that movement, that exercise, isn't going to be as good. And then thirdly, it allows us to then make sure the progressions that we're getting are consistent and measurable, right? So what I mean by this is, say we try and get a progression, more reps, more weight, but in doing so our form and execution suffers, then it's not really a true progression, because we've just, you know, downgraded the form and execution to allow for more reps and more weight. So it's not a true progression. So if we keep form and execution consistent, it then allows us to make sure that the progressions we're getting are consistent. So hopefully you found this video helpful. There's another 3 training basics that we need to be aware of and to think about when it comes to building muscle mass. Okay, there probably will be one more training video after this when I do walk through things in a little bit more fine detail, stuff like exercise selection and exercise order, which we can probably talk about in a little bit more detail, so I won't do it in this video, otherwise the video will be too long. So I'll be doing that next week. But hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please drop a like. If you've got any questions, again, throw them down in the comments, because I can always expand on it. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe so you can keep up to date with this series. Take care.